As we begin, please note that this panel received approval for continuing education from CompTIA, GIAC, and CertNexus. If you are interested in the CEUs, make sure to stay for the full panel, and if you are an AFCEA member seeking attendance documentation, please scan your badge at the iPad located in the back of the room as you exit the session. If you're not a member, stop by booth 2933 to join today. To qualify for CEUs, the panel must run a full 60 minutes, so please ask some questions. Again, send your questions in by email or text to askmetncyber@gmail.com. Now, please welcome Chief Warrant Officer Tim Reyna, U.S. Army retired, AFCEA's CIO and CTO, to the stage.
Before I get started, I'd like to highlight our upcoming event, TechNet Emergence. It'll be held in Reston, Virginia, July 15th and 16th, where we'll address some critical technology areas. I now have the pleasure and honor to introduce our moderator for this panel, Mr. Randy Resnick. Mr. Resnick serves as the director of the newly established Zero Trust Portfolio Management Office within DoD CIO/CS. He joined DoD CIO from the national agency, where he earned over 34 years of experience in offensive and defensive cybersecurity, most recently serving as NSA's Zero Trust Strategic Leader. As a Zero Trust Portfolio Management Office Director, Mr. Resnick focus will be provided strategic guidance, direct alignment on DoD Zero Trust efforts, and prioritize resources to accelerate Zero Trust adoptions across the DoD, while strengthening coordination and collaboration with key partners and stakeholders across the Department of Defense and the IC communities. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Randy Resnick this morning.
Tongue-in-cheek, you said it never could be done, and we did it. So what's going to happen here in this panel is we're going to be talking about 3 success stories of Zero Trust that we've been able to accomplish within the DoD ZT Portfolio Office. We have a whole bunch of questions. We're going to go over an hour. We're going to take questions from the audience as long as it takes, and we'll hopefully end it at 12 noon. So with that, I'll sit. And before I begin, how about we start here, Ian, and we'll go down the line for introductions.
All right. Thanks, sir. I'm Ian Leatherman, so I run our Zero Trust strategy across all of Microsoft Federal. So I am looking across how the entire government has been deploying Zero Trust efforts, as there are multiple strategies across government. I will say I think DoD is leading the way, so everything that Mr. Resnick has been doing is the lead racehorse that everybody else is trying to catch up with. But part of the joy of what I get to do is take those best practices that we're finding in pockets of innovation across the federal government and then share that and bring everybody up to a proper security posture.
My name is Herb Kelsey. I am from Dell. I report into the Office of the CTO, who is also the Chief AI Officer, and I've been responsible for building out our private Zero Trust cloud to meet the DoD specification, and happy to have been able to accomplish that for the US DoD.
Morning. My name is Chris Pam. I'm from DISA. You might have heard in the earlier presentation about Thunderdome and DISA's implementation of Zero Trust. So I'm the portfolio manager for that, for Thunderdome, which is DISA's execution of Zero Trust. across the DISA DAO and also across the rest of the department where applicable. Over the last couple of years, we've taken, like Mr. Barner said, a concept to a place where we have something that's been purple team tested by Mr. Resnick and his team, working with the Army TISMO and other members of blue team, red team, purple team to walk down the path of compliance with zero trust. So that's recent news over the last 30 to 45 days where we've gotten the final report and basically integrated all the technology that DISA brings to bear into a packaged solution that we're offering through DISA and across the board for certainly the DAFAs, the Defense Agencies and Field Activities, which Thunderdome is a component of, certain combatant commands we're working with as well, and other partners across the services.
Good morning, my name is David Volker. I work for the DON CIO as a Zero Trust Implementation Lead. I'm the primary author for the Zero Trust Implementation Plan that we have a second version out that lays out a 4-phased approach for the Department of Navy, that's Marine Corps and Big Navy, to implement Zero Trust by the end of, our target level Zero Trust by the end of FY 2027. Also proud to announce, and most of you heard in the news, that Flank Speed has met target and advanced Zero Trust requirements. I think it's 151 out of 152. And on a daily basis, you'll see about 570,000 users logging on to Flank Speed in that secure environment. So it's a great honor to work with all the folks that put that together, from Naval Networkcom, Fleet Cybercom, Microsoft, the vendors, all coming together in a partnership that led to our COA 2 implementation for Big Navy to meet target advanced level Zero Trust.
Excellent, thank you very much. So we are represented here by Microsoft, Dell, and DISA, and the US Navy. So I'd like to start it off. Clearly, you all have lessons learned. Can you talk about the big rock lessons learned that all of you have faced? There's vendors in the community right now. There are users and recipients of future Zero Trust products. Could you enlighten us and speak to what are some of these challenges that your company, or the Navy in this case, faced as you were going down in the Zero Trust journey, the assessment process, and what's going to be leading going forward? How are you gearing up for it? So Dave, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so the biggest challenge, I think, was more than 4 years ago when we started engaging with vendors and we had the newly minted definition of what target and advanced was. And what we found was that many of the vendors were repackaging products that they already had, really didn't map to the target level Zero Trust requirements that we needed. But over the last 2 or 3 years, we're seeing more vendors being more agreeable to show how they map to target level Zero Trust, and allow our programs that are doing their gap analysis to determine which vendors that can actually help them to get to target level Zero Trust based on their needs. So that was a big challenge in the beginning. Another challenge was overall culture with the programs adopting Zero Trust, making sure that funding was being requested, palmed for in their programs so they could implement Zero Trust. So a lot of those challenges were reflected in our iPlan version 2.0. So between now and the end of 2025, we're going to be auditing our technical baselines, get an understanding of where we're at today, do some autonomous pen testing, understanding what that security posture looks like, identifying out of the 152, how many are actually applicable to that technical baseline. That's a huge challenge programmatically, a lot of labor intensive activities going on there. Pen test that environment before they do any reconfiguration and determine what the security posture is today, reconfigure, and then re-perform that pen test to find out what the overall value is to inform that acquisition approach for the things they do need to buy. So that's going to be a huge challenge. So we have over 2,000 programs within the Department of Navy, between the Marine Corps and Big Navy, that have to identify those things that they need to buy and then get that in the pipeline for acquisition and everything installed by the end of FY 27.
Let me just, before we go to DISA, Chris, let me just speak to the audience about the rigor that it takes to actually get these products, these ZT products, to actually achieve target or advanced. It's very different than the way normally the government evaluates products and services. When it comes to zero trust, we're really, the DoD definition of zero trust is trying to stop the adversary. We want to minimize the adversary's ability to move through the network and have freedom of movement and exploit DoD data. That means they can't move laterally. They can't break out of a microsegment. They can't increase privilege escalation. And if they try any of these things and more, it would become very noisy, and it buys us time as a defender. And so for all these things, this is what these products went through. In addition, we did purple teaming, which is the combination of red and blue together, something very different and not very much practiced until Zero Trust came along, when we needed both red and blue together because we needed speed. We needed the attack, fix, attack, fix, attack, fix to happen in near real time. Because if we did it the normal way, attack, fix is about 12 months. Normally, anybody that has worked the DoD, red teams, blue teams, you schedule a red team, they come in, they do their thing, and then we have a blue team. Normally, if you're lucky, they're 6 months apart. And we couldn't do that in Zero Trust. We wanted fast speed. And so we did a 3-week evaluation on purple. And we also did a challenge scenario of 10 ZT tests, or test scenarios that had to pass. All of the 10 have to pass. So this is very hard to do. If it wasn't hard to do, we would have 10 or more solutions here at the moment. So that's what's going on behind everything that you're going to be hearing about this morning. So with that, Chris?
So I think that scope, complexity, and size, Dave, you talked a little bit about this when you talk about 2,000 programs. This has a similar number of programs across the DoD and the greater environment. We have a lot. So I think what we found was you have to take advantage of what you have on the ground now. And I don't know that we started there, right? But I think you had to go down a path of, hey, what programs of record do I have now that help you enable Zero Trust? What products do I have in my ecosystem that I can integrate together? I think of things like identity and ICAM and everyone who's been working on systems for 20, 25 years, administrators access systems and how we control administrators and insiders, right, is something we've been looking at for many, many years. But Zero Trust did a great job of codifying that even more to talk about how we can walk down the path of protecting the environment in that space. So we leveraged programs that we had in DISA. Thunderdome began as something that was intended to fill gaps that we identified, foundational gaps that we identified from the beginning. We had things on the ground. So we had a security environment, we had a SIEM, we had a CSSP. These are things that are not new to DISA or the Navy or anywhere else, right? So we had to decide if what we had was adequate or needed advancement. And in many cases, we found across the board that we needed to add some other tools. So earlier, Mr. Barners mentioned 15, 20 tools that we've integrated. And more. So when you integrate many tools like that, one of the issues that Mr. Resnick and I have talked about in the greater community is interoperability. So when we think about challenges, I think about things like how do these products work together and where we really need your help. I understand sometimes it's not in the business interest of each company for these things to work together, but for something as large as the Department of Defense, we need to solve that problem, or we can't defend against the adversary. So what we did at DISA was combine multiple programs that were existing in some cases and not existing in other cases. And then we merged it with service offerings, beginning with DISA, and then we're have moved on to the DAFA migration, Defense Agency and Field Activity Migration, which is going to solve a large percentage of the problems for commodity IT, so for your laptops and phones. But when Dave mentioned something like your applications, sure, it's going to help in that space, and these things are integrated together, but there might be additional steps that we need to take to get the effects that we're looking for. So, relish the opportunity to work with Mr. Resnick and team on the purple team, and things were fixed real time. But what I will say is that because of the experience DISA had in this space, You know, we blocked and alerted on every attack right from the beginning of the Purple Team examination. So it was a great exercise. We learned a ton from doing this. And I'm sure the Navy did as well as they walked through this. And what we hope to do, working with Mr. Resnick and the rest of my teammates here on the panel, is apply that to a larger data set, which is what we intend to do. Because there's no point in doing this, sir, if we can't move down a path of applying this, which is why I think we're all here today.
So Chris, before I move on, would you also, to Dave's point, was culture or changing the culture in DISA a big challenge for you? And was obtaining resources, people, other resources, a challenge for you?
Yeah, so I think culture is always a challenge. So we had some advantages in this space. DISA does pretty much one thing, IT, right? So IT is a part of what we do. So I think we had a distinct advantage. Doesn't mean we didn't have problems, right? Because you have to apply this at scale and at scope, right? So when you're a program manager running a program, and I've ran a couple, including this one, you know, you hear the term gold plating, right? So when you start having a culture conversation with program managers and you say, hey, in addition to all these other 800 activities you have to do from an accreditation standpoint, we also need you to do X number of zero trust activities to defend against the adversary. So culturally, that was a challenge to change that. There was an education piece to that, which we do a lot of work on, working with you and DAU and other entities across the Department of Defense. So you have to educate people. You then have to make it important to them to comply with zero trust. And then lastly, which we've been talking through up here on the panel, is validation of the activity. So sure, Purple Team is one way to do that, but at scale and scope, that's not gonna work. So we've worked with our authorizing official at DISA and with a larger DoD and Mr. Resnick and team on how we add controls and overlays to walk down the path of ensuring that people are meeting the zero trust outcomes we require. So to me, it's teach people, apply, integrate, and then validate. I think we're getting further on validation with Purple Team, but we need to expand from there after the last couple of discussions we've had, sir.
It's great, great. Okay, so we've heard from two components of the Department of Defense here. The next two you're going to hear from a vendor perspective, which is, you know, I didn't ask you to sit this way, but this is great. So I'll turn it to Herb, and I'll say, Herb, you represent Dell, as you mentioned, the Dell 4.0. So what is your perspective on the lessons learned as a company, your team, all the challenges that you faced to put out 4.0?
There's only 49 minutes left.
We could talk forever.
I'll try and take a few. So for Dell, we had a different perspective because we were coming into this being asked to support a mission capability. We did this all on our investment, and so some of the challenges that we had were that I had was ensuring that this investment would be made year over year because it was going to take some time to implement the architecture that had been published. From a vendor standpoint, we had a different challenge as well because we were doing COA 3, which is the private cloud in different form factors down to the tactical edge. We didn't have the ability to have any dependencies on a hyperscaler. And so what that meant was that as we were triaging vendors, we had to always get capability from them that could be deployed disconnected. And that's a challenge because a lot of vendors have a cloud strategy that they're employing, and it means that their on-premise or locally defined capabilities are not the first thing that they want to recommend. And so I think I feel some of the same pain. We have over 30 plus vendors. We have over 75 products. I got asked at a DoD TEM why we had so many vendors, and I said, well, why do you have so many requirements? It just kind of goes hand in hand. I think that at the core of it for Dell has been taking the step of being a technology integrator and all that entails. Meeting a specific requirement that was defined external to ourselves. But I will say that pull, the fact that there was a defined architecture and that there was a defined framework was one of the things that allowed us to keep the corporate investment. I think the other element of keeping the corporate investment was the fact that this is applicable outside of DoD. It's applicable to the DIB, it's applicable to all of the folks OCONUS who are looking for privacy and sovereignty and the like. And so I think those are some of the challenges for us to overcome. I don't want to talk about the purple team. There's PTSD. It's not as much fun as it sounds to go through about 45 days of having elite hackers inside your system. It's a long process.
Herb, before we move on, we heard it from Chris Pym. No one single vendor could deliver ZT without really integrating other vendor products and capabilities. So could you specifically talk about the difficulty you had in integrating, you said 30 different companies. I don't know if that means products or companies. Yeah. And also, how are you handling the licensing and the patching of 30 individual vendors in one SKU?
Right. So it's 30 plus vendors. It's about 75 distinct products as you go through ICAM, privilege access management, software-defined networking, network segmentation, visibility on the network, and the rest. What we had to do was build an ecosystem. That ecosystem had to be a force multiplier. It had to add value and not detract. We have situations where in our lab, we have literally competitors who come in to support us who are seeing the faceplate of a competitor. So competitors to Dell, competitors to each other. We had to put that aside to get this done. And I think that the value proposition was greater than any of the issues that came up. But it was a challenge. Things went end of life. Vendors got bought and sold, went out of business. These were the issues that the commands face. These are the issues that public sector companies face. And that's the integration burden that we publicly said we were going to take on. In terms of keeping everything patched, everything up to date, it's challenged, but it's one that we supported from a business, from the business side, so that we get timely updates, we get things ahead of time, and also one that we supported from a technical standpoint by trying to build as much infrastructure as code as possible, so that when changes, when updates come through, we can integrate that into the base environment quickly. But yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, but it's the challenge that we're trying to help keep everyone else from having to go through. I mean, similar to what everyone else is talking about, what are the best practices, what are the configurations, what actually meets the DoD requirement for zero trust. We're trying to encapsulate that as well. Like I said, it's just a little bit different when you're not under contract. And you met with some of my leadership, and it's a challenge when you can't have any dependency on a hyperscaler, because that's a lot of where the vendor community has gone. And COA 3 actually requires you to not do that.
Right. So that's why I asked the question. I wanted the audience to understand that it's not just have a vendor integrate products and make a sale. It's all about the sustainment piece. And people forget, I've never heard it from the audience, how do you patch? Who does that testing? Yeah. So all of that support is still on the vendor or the integrator. Somehow that has to be delivered to the government so that we have one big patch rather than patching 30 different systems. Correct. Because it still has to maintain its configuration that it was evaluated in. That's right. It's not so easy.
So we just went through that. We, believe it or not, we stopped patching during our assessment. We had a backlog. We had to develop that as one kit that we could apply to our environment and still validate that we had maintained capability. Yeah.
Okay, Ian, you represent Microsoft. You are a key partner in the flank speed success. It utilizes or is reliant on the Azure cloud. Can you talk to the audience about the lessons learned that Microsoft had on this? I believe it's the first one, the first real product that has passed through. It also hit advanced. Bravo. And so let us know how Microsoft handled all this.
Yeah, so a lot of the lessons learned that Microsoft has had as a company are really what we passed into flank speed. So I'll kind of start with our Microsoft Zero Trust journey a little bit. We've been doing this for over 10 years. Microsoft was not even using Microsoft products to defend itself when we first started this journey, right? So the same integration challenges, the same culture challenges are what we faced as a company in the early days of Zero Trust. And like a good tech company, we thought we could solve it strictly with tech. And so what did we do? We built better products. We said, hey, why can't we defend the company with our products? Let's make those products better. And that ultimately led to what is the Defender suite today and these products that we're leveraging. But I think we kind of missed the mark there for a while too, where we had the tech, but it was still a very small part of the company who was managing this and defending it, right? So the entire company wasn't involved in the security process. It wasn't until we got over that hurdle of every single person in the company has a security function and is accountable for security that we finally got to that end state of saying our company is truly getting to this zero trust end state, if there even is an end state, but every single person is involved. So it's this combination of the tech, integrating those things together, making the tech seamless, which we've of course productized, and then bringing that into the culture. And so that is a lot of how Flank Speed went about this, right? So when we started with Flank Speed, it was a COVID response. It was, we're in crisis. The Navy had over 500,000 endpoints, right? They had no visibility on. So brought the cloud in as the COA 2 cloud offering, but actually deployed it to the COA 1 on-prem situation. So it was this almost a 1.5, and I think Chris has used 1.5 in the past, where we're actually using the cloud to defend and monitor and integrate what is existing on-prem and bringing modern into legacy. And so that same journey we did internally at Microsoft is basically the same journey that Navy started doing, is bring this stuff in, start identifying what you have, censor everything up, and then you can actually see what's broken and make very quick decisions about that. And so what was a well over 10-year journey internally at Microsoft, Navy has accelerated into just a few years of their journey, but they're always finding things, and they're always, I would say, finding things that nobody else in the federal government has found from an adversarial standpoint, and then more importantly, they're sharing that information across the federal government. So the better everybody gets, the more secure everybody gets, the better and more secure it makes all of us. And so that's the same thing we do at Microsoft, right? We are getting attacked from very new and novel adversaries on a daily basis. We share that information with the government. We share that information with other vendors. This is definitely a team sport, and it's very hard. But it's great to have been a part of what the Navy's doing and to support them, and then take those lessons learned across the DoD and the rest of the federal government.
So before I leave you, Ian, and I know what the answer is. It's an easy answer. But the question that I have is, you've clearly learned a lot in terms of zero trust. I'm a complete believer that it's the way forward for proper cybersecurity. So if you believe that, and you have experience with flank speed and observation of other successes, how have you taken the lessons learned or the successes of zero trust and used it as part of your other business processes? Has the learning or the observation of what you did on this project bled into how you engage with your other vendors, other company or sectors like banking, the other vendor community, the defense industrial base, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the biggest thing, again, is visibility. If you aren't censoring up everything, regardless of vendor, regardless of location, you can't detect that it's broken, you can't detect that it's vulnerable or even compromised. That is the single biggest outcome I think that we've taken from this, and it is, what we started as a company with everything that we have, around 50 trillion signals a day or so. Just in the last year, that's ramped up to 75 trillion signals a day. So we are learning, the biggest lesson learned in this is you need telemetry from all aspects of your environment. And that includes all vendors, right? We are collecting telemetry from multiple vendors. We're not necessarily a networking company, but man, we need those network taps. We're reintroducing network taps into our own network infrastructure. You need that telemetry, and some other sectors like banking had, I think, learned that lesson before. They had a lot of telemetry, but it was siloed or specific telemetry. If anything, we've learned you need all of it, and you need it to come together, which creates its own problem, right, as so much data noise. But I would say luckily we have things like AI right now that are helping us quickly sift through that noise. So there isn't a worry if I'm getting flooded with telemetry anymore. Like just a few years ago, you really had to denoise. Now I would lean on collect the telemetry. When in doubt, collect it. You never know what new and novel adversarial technique you'll find in it.
Great. Herb?
I'd like to add to that. So I think that for us, we had to have identity-specific telemetry in order to make the decisions that we were asked to make downstream. So that was big for us. I guess I would ask, because I've not had the opportunity, were your purple team surprised at how visible they were on the network? That was, I think, the biggest, not lesson learned, but that was the biggest shock to us, was that their experience was that they were largely invisible on the networks. And I think when we interacted, the surprise was how visible they actually were. So just...
Yeah, so I would say we definitely saw that, and we saw that in the very early days of FlankSpeed. I had global admin access when we were first standing up FlankSpeed 2, and I actually gave my credentials to the red team, and I said, go for it, do what you can with this, right? It's assume that compromise, we actually put it to the test. And that was exactly a shock, as the blue forces were able to watch every single activity with that, let the automated systems do their thing. And then the red team, because we did this in a purple team environment, the red team actually was able to quickly learn how they were detected, and they actually were able to build newer and better techniques to up their game. And so rather than having a
adversarial.
Yeah, you actually up the adversary's game, which ended up upping the blue force's game. So a big fan of the purple teaming environment because of that.
Yeah, the purple team exposed that for us as well. We were able, it was kind of a call and response. They would apply a technique, they would be seen, they would adjust, the system would adjust, and it was kind of a ladder up. But yeah, I think I just echo the visibility and the fact that it has to be identified and associated with someone. I mean, we should talk. It was interesting to normalize all the telemetry data as well. That was a challenge.
So in this case, visibility is a good thing for the defender.
Yes.
Because if you were the adversary, you would be very visible in what is happening.
Yes.
And that's due to the nature of zero trust, where you have to get down to the endpoint and the user and monitor activity.
That's correct.
Whereas right now, we're not doing that necessarily on the network. So today, you can't really see the network, and that's a very big challenge for the defending organization.
And when you get telemetry, you can't associate it with the individual to be able to know what behavior, who's causing that behavior.
Right. Dave, let's get back to you. So FlankSpeed, the question I have is, or the statement I have is that the ZT Portfolio Office set a deadline of the end of fiscal 27 to achieve target level zero trust. FlankSpeed hit advanced. By definition, you achieve target. When will FlankSpeed be available? Let's talk about inside Navy. I think you mentioned it, but outside Navy, available to the rest of the Department of Defense to utilize or implement for them to achieve target ZT.
So I would think that would be a better question for Ian, but my understanding is that you can take the configuration as it is without the data, and you can lift and shift that configuration, test it, validate it, and make that available to other customers. The difficulty in doing that, I'm unsure of, so that might be more of a Microsoft question, to be able to automate the deployment of that for whatever customer walks up. But once the automation and deployment is done, I would say within 24 to 48 hours, they would be able to set up a flank speed clone that's ready for a new tenant to populate.
Ian, how would that work if outside Navy wanted to implement flank speed? What does it take to do that?
Yeah, great question. So I think the good news for DoD is DoD already owns the tools needed here, right? It kind of goes back to how Microsoft had this, is started with tech. DoD owns the tech. And so those configurations are actually getting pushed out in many environments today. That last mile, though, is the same thing we encountered with Microsoft internally, which is, I think, the people and the culture. So if I was going to say there's a long pole in the tent to get to 2027, there is still not a relentless seeking of the truth inside of the DoD. So the tech is there, the tech is deployed in many cases, but how many commanders can rattle off how many endpoints, how many applications, how many users are on their environment at any given time? In business, right, you need to know your numbers down pat. We still don't have a culture where people across the DoD are like, I know my environment and I have real-time visibility of it. So I'd say it's a tricky question there, because it's, yes, you already own the tech needed, but are you actually doing it to achieve zero trust? Because you can't buy zero trust, right? It is a hard thing to achieve. It is a culture. It is a mindset. And until every unit commander knows exactly what's in their environment every day and they can rattle that off the top of their head, I don't think you will be able to get to zero trust, besides being, yes, compliant from configuration standpoint. But it's far more than that.
So I think I heard in there that it's not a technology problem. It's technically feasible. It's totally doable. It takes a little bit of time. I don't know if it's 2 days or a week, but essentially it's not waiting a year.
Correct.
It's way faster than that, and they could potentially utilize flank speed to achieve target ZT before 27.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's what I wanted to
The tech is here
out.
to do it today. If the order came out and DoD wanted to say, let's do it overnight, 100%.
Okay. Chris, let's talk about Thunderdome. I love that name. Is it available outside DISA?
Absolutely. Right, so now is the answer to your question, but I want to caveat a couple things, working with Ian and David and Herb and others, right? So applicability based on terrain is a thing, right? So I think that we need to understand what we're, we've talked about having a package solution, but we've also talked about merging multiple things together to achieve an outcome, right? So DISA leverages Microsoft for a public cloud solution, especially in Azure, right? So like, we would apply things in that space, and part of the trickiness and the culture that we've talked about is really pulling to bear the things that are in DISA that make sense to get at a zero trust outcome. I can give a great example, which is we work with a hosting, infrastructure as a service, software as a service. We have groups like Olympus that has a public cloud service offering, which we've integrated zero trust into, and we continue to get effects in that space, and we can continue to work with them. So if you're working, sometimes it's how to buy it, right? And from my perspective, if you're working with DISA already, and you're either on-premise or in a cloud environment using JWCC, I'm speaking with my customer account representative or your representative at DISA to apply zero trust principles and what that looks like from a service request form standpoint, right? So that's a thing you can do. So places that we're going to help that you can apply now is public cloud. We could help in that space through a service offering that includes zero trust, Olympus. Private cloud, we have something called Stratus, which you could apply in that space, and we could help you down that path as well. On-prem in our data centers, you should hold us accountable to get you zero trust outcomes in that space as well, especially things like identity and places where we could help move across the board. And then on DoDNet, we're going to bring that side of it from a network standpoint. And I think in the beginning of this journey, we talked a lot, or sometimes we overlooked, maybe not even overlooked, maybe we started from different places, right? Maybe it made a lot of sense on Flank Speed or Microsoft to start from the place of, hey, I want to understand what your endpoints are doing, and I want to protect my application, and I want to bring that data into a SIEM, right? DISA, we approached it a little bit differently. It wasn't that we weren't looking at the cloud. It's that we thought the network was going to be important and remain relevant, and we still think the network is going to remain relevant, whether it's a local area network or transport to get to it. So software-defined networking is a component, a piece of zero trust, right? The overlay to get to things on different fabrics and different networks based on classification is important. Defending the network down to the data or up at the data and down to the user is another thing that's fundamentally important. Do I want a policy enforcement point, or my first policy enforcement point, to be in the cloud? Probably not. I probably want it on your Basecamp post station. I want to be able to see Dave Alker log in when he logs into the first switch, not when he's in my cloud environment walking through applications. Now, sure, you're going to put defenses on both sides. You're going to put it in the cloud to prevent lateral movement. You're going to cordon off workload and cordon off internal to workload to prevent lateral movement and prevent the adversary. But from my standpoint, I think much of the department's come to the realization that I want that identity that Herb talked about. I want that as early as I can get it. And I want to keep you from moving laterally on any part of my network or any piece of my data, be it local or in the cloud or on premise. So I think as we continue to evolve, and I think part of this is a revolution and part of this is an evolution, right? I think we have to walk down the path of what makes sense and continue to add capability that gets us down that path. And I think working together, we've done a lot of that. But I wouldn't ignore the user, I wouldn't ignore the data, I wouldn't ignore the network, and I wouldn't ignore the hosting environment. And DISA has offerings you can do right now in that space. And lastly, I'm taking up a little too much time, what I'll say is this, is we also have a contract that can be leveraged and is being leveraged immediately. So it basically gets you past the acquisition component of this. And we could leverage, you know, Microsoft in that case, or we could leverage capabilities that Herb used in his space to go out and go down the path of integrating it across the board. So whether it's hosting, whether it's zero trust, whether it's integration, which I think there's a large component of this integration, we could help you right now with that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so to Chris's point, but then also to ducktail on what Ian was saying, when it comes from a zero trust design process, you really need to identify those things you want to protect. So you may be given a tenant that's zero trust ready, but if it's not configured, it's not going to do you that much help. So you want to build from that macro boundary, that perimeter defense, identify those things you want to protect, and then add in that microsegmentation, to Chris's point, that policy enforcement point, all the way out to that perimeter defense. So when I log in or somebody else logs in, I'm checking in with my authentication token from our Naval Identity Service Provider, or if I'm coming in and using Entra ID, they know it's me when I'm coming in. And then the data pathway within that environment is plumbed specifically for me. So in the past, in a perimeter defense, I would be able to get through, I'd be able to see pretty much everything in the network. And unfortunately, that's where adversaries, when they subverted an account, would take advantage, be able to laterally move, hide in the network. These red teams and purple teams could pretty much have carte blanche like they were a kid in a candy store. But once you have zero trust tools in place and properly configured, and you identify those things you want to protect, building out those defenses from those things with a policy enforcement point that provides that visibility for the analytics tools like your SIEM SOAR tools, and then you exercise command and control when you find an anomaly or when you detect something that may be a subverted account. That's why when I look at the target level requirements, I am harping all the time on user and entity behavioral analytics. Is this person acting as a financial person? Is this person acting as an engineer? Or are they trying to laterally move in the network? Is there something they're trying to do that's going to be blocked? But is that an attempt, an indication, an adversary in our network that we need to expel? And it's that visibility and that command and control that makes zero trust much different that we have in our traditional cybersecurity in the past. So as you get closer and closer to those things you want to protect, you want to make it as quiescent as possible. You only want those things talking to that data resource that absolutely need to. So you build out the microsegmentation from that thing you want to protect to the applications, and you allow users to get the applications, but not directly to the data. And I think that's what makes it very key. So if you find an extra talker on that segment of the network, bells and alarms are going off right away, and makes it very quick, a very strong reaction from a security operations center to be able to defend that portion of the network. And so we may be able to give you the tools with a flank speed tenant clone or provide Thunderdome, but you as a program integrating those types of tools into your environment need to upfront identify those things you want to protect and work with your cybersecurity service providers to make sure they know where that visibility needs to happen, where that command control needs to happen, to be able to maneuver that network and defend it in the event of a breach or a toehold in your environment.
Herb?
So I responded to something earlier. Again, unique situation. We have a COA 3 solution, which is by definition a private cloud that was assessed. So we can deliver that. That's different than how do you get there. We're not part of JWCC. We're not part of the Thunderdome IDIQ. I think we should be, because that would make acquisition of this much more straightforward. But those were essentially set up for hyperscalers. I get that. But COA 3 is, at least my understanding, a viable option for DoD. So what we can do is different than how you get there. I mean, we've been working with integrators like Leidos and others that have the contract space to do these things, but we're not part of that acquisition environment as a vendor. And so I think that, that can create not challenges, but I think it's a different path. I think that the how is going to be through a systems integrator who has a contract to move somebody to zero trust, and that would be the vehicle. I think that the integration into the mission environment, which is critical, what we've been looking at is the overlay that got produced that takes people through a lot of what you were describing is what the overlay talks about in the discovery phase, and then phases 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so we've certainly been trying to understand how that would apply. One of the things that we found, I guess lessons learned, is that there are things that are considered optional or variable in the discovery phase that would unmake the very accreditation that you talked about if the end user could actually change that. There are things they shouldn't be able to change even though they're variables, and things that are not optional, like labeling the data. So to answer your question, we've been quoting this system now for some time. The vehicle within the government, from the acquisition standpoint, is going to be through federal systems integrators for us, I think. And then, the rest of the how is dependent on, the particular command or the installing unit, what their needs are from a policy perspective, and how they get applied into this
And to your point, this has never been done before. So we're going to have to learn as we go. Yeah. And in your case, as Dell's case, it's very unique because you go through integrators or resellers to push your products into the DoD if there's interest. Sure. And this kind of breaks the model unless you want to use the same model. But I had a different question. You mentioned, Fort Zero was completely 100% IR&D on Dell's part.
That's correct.
And you took all the risk, and you made it out the gate. Outside the DoD, without really getting, without revealing anything that you don't feel that you don't want to reveal in it for a sensitive way, could you at least talk to us about who else has approached you about maybe procuring a Fort Zero for their own purposes?
So the only way that this got approved by Dell was that we showed commercial viability as well and viability outside of the US. The list is long. It is foreign governments who have different privacy requirements and sovereignty requirements than the US does. It is, I mean, it is critical infrastructure sectors from healthcare to energy to financial services to telco globally. Since April 2nd, when you announced that we had met your criteria, it's been up and to the right. Every command, every large systems integrator has come inbound, program by program, every single one.
So I asked that question for a very specific reason. I wanted to share with the audience the demand signal that's coming for a zero trust solution, because it's very difficult to get a demand signal inside the DoD. We know what we need. Eventually it's a finite number of systems, and then of course we modernize on that. You're really the only example right now of a pure play demand signal for a successful ZT product.
So I'll give you an example. So universities get federal funding for R&D. It funds their graduate programs largely, different places, NSF, others, DoD. I have a university who was building a very large AI environment and realized that they couldn't secure it the way they wanted to because they couldn't get to multi-tenancy. We showed them what we could do. They're very engaged, they're very interested. What's key for them is that there are universities out there that are currently being sued by the US government for taking government funding, R&D funding, and not securing it properly. That's an actual lawsuit that's on the books now. 2 universities, 10 more in a sealed indictment. They are deathly afraid of making $100 to $200 million investment in AI so that they can take on government funds in R&D and not securing it properly. And so, I mean, there are drivers like that are, our demand curve is almost straight up.
Impressive.
And half of it is US DoD components around the world coming to ask us how they can accelerate their journey, because they know that that deadline is coming and they're doing assessment. I think now that they understand that there is something that's been through the very rigorous testing that DoD CIO had, the interest is quite high.
So I'll pause here and say I've predicted this. I've said this early on when I came into the ZTPFMO, that the market here is gigantic. I just didn't have any evidence of it, but I knew innately that the demand for cybersecurity solutions, especially in a ZT sense, would be very, very large. You're the first example that has experienced this. And I hope there are more. There are more in the pipeline, but I would encourage vendors and companies to work together, integrate together, because the government's not going to integrate these products. We don't know how. We don't have the time or experience to know 30 products and then do the patching on top of that. We're going to have to buy commercially, and we need a commercial solution that delivers target or advanced. If you don't mind, unless you had something to add on top of Dave on flank speed, I don't want to.
Well, so I mean, I'll throw on there too, like to your point of the demand there. When our announcement came out, we had the same problem, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's a problem.
We were getting calls from outside the U.S., right? So banks from Germany reached out. Other healthcare providers.
So you're getting international demand as well.
100%. So that's kind of why I kind of led with, even though I see this federal-wide, DoD is leading the way. That's not just in the U.S. government, that is internationally. So there are so many other sectors out there that want to do what DoD did. And that was a huge thing for us, and why we actually publicized our framework of how we connected this all together, right? So we have a Zero Trust page where we said, here's how we met with the 152 activities for DoD. And then we did the same thing now with the CISA model. But this is not something that we're trying to keep close hold. This is a success that is driving security worldwide. And so if we have any hope of competing against, especially Russia and China right now in the cyber domain, this is a team sport. So that's why we share lessons learned, and we are, the flank speed integration and how we did that stuff is exactly how I'm running stuff at home to defend my family, right? So this is not just something you have to be in the DoD space for. This is commercially available. Anybody can buy it. Anybody can integrate it. We've publicized that. The demand signal is tremendous.
Great. According to this clock, we have about 12 or 15 minutes. I want to leave time for questions. I had 2 more questions, but I'd like to end it here so the audience could ask their questions. If we run out of questions from the audience, I could always come back to the last question I have here. But I want to thank you all here for sharing. We could probably spend another hour. I have a million questions to ask, but I think we got the gist of exactly the things you needed to go through in order to get out at least first generation, highly successful cybersecurity ZT products. And for the 3 solutions here, I really wish you the very best on your sales, and I hope it encourages next generation products to come after this. So I'd like to open it up for questions. Either, I don't see mics, but either scream it to the right person, and we'll answer it to the best of our ability.
So the questions have been coming in by email. The first one is, what role does ICAM play in the overall success of the Zero Trust solutions?
Was the question ICAM?
ICAM.
Would you like to answer that?
Yeah, so I think that was for me. What I would say is that identity is foundational Zero Trust. The other panel members have said that really across the board. Right now I'm tracking 7 approved identity solutions. The other day I was speaking to a different group of people, and they asked what was the first thing or the foundational fundamental thing, and I think identity is that. So from my standpoint, if you're going to implement Zero Trust in any terrain, any environment, you should look at identity first, because a lot of Zero Trust is based on conditional access. Well, you need identity to do conditional access, right? That's pretty foundational to how we do things. And then the identity space goes down a path of attributes, and whether we have good attributes or role-based attributes, and and how you make those decisions, and really, I think you go down the path of UEBA and other things as you extend to the path. So user behavior analysis, right? Of all this starts with what the people are, what the device is, or who the people are, what the device is, what their normal behavior patterns are, and then visualization, which Ian talked about earlier, of those things. So, but foundationally, you have to start with identity. So I would
absolutely say identity is, you need a source of truth for Zero Trust.
Absolutely.
The ICAM system is that source of truth. And then really almost everything branches off with the identity ICAM foundation. Dave?
Yeah, and so I do want to point out with your ICAM solution, please do not skip on implementing target level Zero Trust on that system. So your user repository,
exactly.
All of the entitlements, all of the attributes in those authentication tokens are going to be used by an attribute-based access control control mechanism in accordance with NIST 800-162, as augmented by NIST 800-207, where you get the policy decision point that now has a policy engine and a policy administrator. And when we rely on those authentication tokens, not only are we going to look at your attributes, to look at your role, your country of origin, different things that are unique about you, your job code, but within the Department of Navy, we're going to be looking at those entitlements. And in my position, what we want to do is we want to match those entitlements to metadata tags within our database repos. And if you don't have the right entitlement in that authentication token, you will never be mapped through the data pathway to be able to talk to the application to work with that data repo. It's just that simple. That's how important ICAM is. And we want to follow what the NSA put out in an article called Embracing a Zero Trust Security Model, using that tuple, binding a person's authentication token with the device that they're using. to defeat machine in the middle attacks like Mimikatz, MFA token bypassing, those types of attacks where an adversary would try to get in with just an authentication token. But our environment not only going to challenge that user's authentication, but also the device they're using. And if those don't match, then we're going to revoke access almost immediately. There's just no way that we can accept machine in the middle attacks in this age, and we need to be able to defend our ICAM solution and also the traversal of that ICAM token through the DoD as it gets to that internal environment where we have deeply integrated zero trust controls in place all the way to the applications, all the way to the data, and provide a very tight data pathway based on an authentication token. So don't undercut or don't spend less on ICAM because you think it's just something that's part of the system that's required. It's a critical part of the system, and I can't footstep that any more than that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
So a couple of comments that I would make. It's important, we talked about it in terms of applying identity to the telemetry. We also found that we had to apply it to another non-person entity, which are the APIs. So it's not just the device, it's also the APIs, because that's where a lot of the hybrid integration comes. But the ICAM is also the foundation of interoperability. I can't tell you how many conversations I'm in where people think that interoperability means having the exact same equipment. That's not what does it. What does it is the fact that you can pass identities, you can federate identities across environments. That's where you get the interoperability, because if you pass the persona and then you can interpret that persona from a guest in your environment, now you're interoperable. So the identity and the federated identity is where you get interoperability from. I find a lot of folks look at interoperability as somehow matching tech. That's not it.
So that's an excellent point. You have to have trust between ICAM systems in order to get that interoperability, which is a nuance of ICAM.
That's correct.
Yeah. Are there another question?
Yes, sir. As DoD moves to a generally deployed heterogeneous zero trust enterprise, what does a zero trust operational order look like? And how do you verify compliance across organizations with different tools?
So we do have the Zero Trust Readiness Assessment tool that is in a soft open right now at the Portfolio Management Office. So the first step is that you would expect. We're going to look for compliance. Have you done the work that we asked you to do? But to Mr. Resnick's point, after you raise your hand and said you met target level zero trust, we're coming in with a purple team, blue and red team to work together and look at the overall quality of that implementation. And if the quality of the implementation is not there, then we're going to let you know that you have more work to be done.
Okay, just to punctuate that, once you get an IATO or an ATO on the zero trust solution and it's fielded and used, we're going to have an appliance that's going to be required that's going to do continuous assessment on that infrastructure, the ZT infrastructure. So that also is part of the solution to make sure that it doesn't drift. That's the word that the portfolio office uses, because we want to keep it in the configuration that it was designed for, which is target or advanced. And if we sense a drift on it, it'll report to the Defender or the CSSP organization, and they'll put it back into compliance. Anything?
I was just going to say, if I'm understanding the tooling that you're discussing, we've also embedded that within our COA 3 solution as well, so that we can,
that's great,
as you say, assess drift.
That's right. So it's not just making a sale on zero trust, it's what do you do after the sale. Having that capability is a must-do for the Department of Defense. We have a continuous assessment requirement.
Yes.
So one of those things too is, beyond the technology, what happens when you do detect that drift? Yes, there's automated configuration changes we can make, but also what if that drift is related to a very new and novel sophisticated attack by an adversary, right? Again, we're seeing Russia, China spend years developing capabilities to target the DoD and government infrastructure. So we don't always know what's going to come next. That's where we're looking at that next step too, which is the operator training. One of the biggest challenges in DoD is the 2 to 3 year PCS cycle, right? You just get somebody trained up on this incredibly hard problem that is IT and cybersecurity and zero trust, just in time for them to PCS into a role that may or may not be using that skill set, right? So we've actually been working with the SANS Institute to actually build a TTX to kind of provide some OJT for these operators to say, here's what it looks like to actually find sophisticated Chinese and Russian attacks in this environment. Here's what this drift looks like. Here's how you would go fix it. And so they're actually operating inside the tool set that is accomplishing ZT. They're not using some of these legacy techniques they had, or they're not just doing traditional Nmap and saying, what's my network look like? We've been moved beyond the network. The schoolhouses haven't, and so that's what we're working on for that last mile.
Great.
What do they do when they detect the problem?
That's great. We didn't get into training, but that was one of my questions. We have a minute and a half. We'll go over a little bit, but one last question we'll take.
Are you able to speak to what future cloud providers are in consideration to be ZT approved?
I could speak to that, and maybe DISA could speak to that. As of right now, it's the 4 JWCC vendors at the moment. If there are more that come around, we will engage with them and encourage them to deliver target ZT or higher in their cloud. And we would purple team them just as equally as we have the others.
And there are,
Yes,
to
please.
build on that, Mr. Resnick, right, there are pilots that are sponsored by your office in different cloud environments that we're looking through different technical solutions and how we can work together.
There are all kinds of, right, but I thought the question was cloud providers, which I interpreted as hyperscalers.
And I will say we're actually partnering with some of those other hyperscalers, right, that are traditional competitors to us. We're partnering with them to show we can actually help defend their clouds as well. So in some cases, those hyperscalers will host an application or host the data, but maybe they don't want to get into the security business. When we bring in, like FlankSpeed, for example, can actually go deploy their tools and defend in these other environments or on-prem. It gets to the whole point of zero trust. It doesn't matter where the data is, you need to defend it. So that includes other hyperscaling clouds as well.
Wherever the DoD goes, ZT has to go with it, and we'll make sure that we're as flexible as possible. Commercially, if something needed to happen, I would look for commercial solutions to do that purple teaming. And there would it would be CISA, I don't know who it would be, DHS, that would validate that target or advanced ZT.
Randy, there's one more thing that I would say. If you're doing this as a vendor, you're going to have to isolate this environment from your corporate network. You just brought that up. We had to do the purple team in a contained environment. It wasn't going to sit in our commercial network.
That was only because, correct me if I'm wrong, your company wanted it that way.
Well, I think any company wants it that way, because if our system is connected to the network, then your purple team can extend out into the rest of the corporation.
That's true.
And I don't think any corporation is going to do that.
Right. Right. So I want to thank Microsoft, Dell, DISA for achieving the near impossible. I want to thank your teams for making it all happen. They deserve all kinds of respect and awards. They've done something that nobody else on the planet has done. And I look forward to continuing our relationship.
Absolutely.
The DoD CIO appreciates the attention to ZT. 3 years ago, you couldn't fill up 2 tables here. So this is how fast it's grown, and I want to thank everybody here in the audience for listening in, and listening in especially because I'm holding you back from lunch. So thank you very much, appreciate it, hope to do it again.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tim Reyna back to the stage.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Randy and team, thank you so much, Mr. Resnick, for being in our panel. Sir, in lieu of a gift, AFCEA will do a donation to the Fisher House on your behalf and the team's behalf. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. For those of us with lunch tickets, it's lunchtime already. So I ask that you make your way back to the exhibit hall, and lunch will be served till 1:30. For those of us that want the CEU credits, please scan your badges in the back, and that scanner will be turned off at noon. We do have another event, it's Meet the Seniors. It's an activity that will be held in the back over here in the high table. So I encourage everybody here to go out there and meet the seniors. You'll see who's there. So thank you everybody for attending today's session.